BMW 7 Series, the brand new 2023 model year. I've been waiting a long time to review this car in person here on the channel, and finally I get the chance to do that. So what we have here, this is a 2023 BMW 760i xDrive, meaning it's all-wheel drive. We do have the twin-turbo V8 under the hood, 536 horsepower, 0 to 60 in about 4.1 seconds. And the thing about this, it's a pretty confusing car to me, because looking at these proportions, going back here and looking at the side view, this is the closest we've come to the most beautiful 7 Series of all time, the E38. However, there are some complications in the front end graphics that we're going to have to play around with. I'm going to do a redesign of the front end, talk about why I really like this design overall, specifically when it comes to the proportions. We're going to have a look at the front end, the side, the rear, the interior, and then we're going to take this for a drive.
Let's have a look at some of the basic spec and tech for the 2023 BMW 760i xDrive. You have a 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8 with a 48-volt hybrid system, putting out a total of 536 horsepower and 553 pound-feet of torque. This is connected to an 8-speed automatic transmission. You do have all-wheel drive with the xDrive. 0 to 60 miles per hour is done in 4.1 seconds. The fuel economy sits at 18 city, 26 highway, and the base price for this car is $116,000. However, this one right here is spec'd up to $162,000.
Starting with the most controversial piece of the new 7 Series, I guess we can all agree that that would be the front end. What we have here is BMW's new integration of the headlights. So the headlights sit down here in the bumper. Then you have the crystal daytime run lights up here, creating some sort of the old angel eyes identity for BMW. But when you look at these two features here, they don't feel like they have a clear connection to them. And we're gonna play around with that in just a second when I show you what I want to do to this front end to make it a proper looking 7 Series. Moving further down, we do have this two-tone color on this one. This is a $16,000 option to have it in this specific color. But what I do like about this color is that it kind of hides the big grills in the center. These grills right here, they blend into the front end. They still look pretty static to me because we have the same shape up top like we have in the bottom. So we're gonna play around with that as well to try to make it feel a little bit more dynamic. You do have the front mounted camera right here in the center, and up on the hood you do have these two creases that goes through the middle of the hood into the BMW logo in the front end. Overall, I think BMW is onto something here. However, I think they need to have more of a consistency throughout the entire lineup and have a clearer, stronger identity in the front end. Moving down further on the front end, it's completely open in this section, and then we have these beautiful wings. I really like how this stretches out here because it feels like it is pretty static with a sharp corner here, straight angle down, and straight base for the front end of the design. I think that suits the 7 Series, so this area is not necessarily something that I want to redesign. I want to focus on the top part right here. And looking at the sides here, yes, you do have functional side slots. All right, so let me show you what I want to do with this front end. Small, not some substantial changes to this design, because I want to respect the idea of BMW's designers, but I think if we just made a couple small tweaks to this, it would just transform this into a proper E38 successor that could have the same legacy as that design. So what I want to do, first of all, as I said, these two objects here, the top part of the daytime run lights with these crystals inside of it and the main headlight down here, I don't feel like they have a clear connection to each other. So what I want to do, raise this up and have it be in line, connected with the top end graphics. That means that we're probably going to have to redesign this outline a little bit to have it be in connection with what's going on in the headlights. That's change number one. Change number two is I want to change the grille design. I want to have it be more of a clear bumper separation between the top half graphics of the front end compared to the lower section, and also make it more stretched out horizontally, the grills. This is a 7 Series. It's supposed to be a bit imposing. I do think this has this imposing look to it, but I think we can improve on it a little bit by shortening the height of the grille and stretching it out horizontally. Now, coming around to the side view of the new 7 Series, and this is where I think BMW absolutely nailed it when it comes to the proportions. These are typical BMW 7 Series proportions because we have the Hofmeister kink intact here. Not sure why they put this big trim piece here, the big piece of plastic in this area, and then we have the roofline going down and the hood almost shooting straight forward into the front end. We can definitely sketch this up by boxing it up in 3 different boxes. You have the front end being one box with the hood, you have the greenhouse being the second box, then you have the third, proper sedan style of the third box back here being the trunk. Overall, a beautiful design by BMW when you look at it from a side view. However, when you look at this car from a side view, just look at how clean and simple everything is. Previous BMWs, the previous one to this, for example, had some graphics going up here and creating almost an air vent in this area, and that has been going on for a while now in the 7 Series, but they cleaned everything up. There's no weird graphics anywhere on the surface of this car, and this just makes it more confusing as to why did they make the front end so complex when everything else, even the rear, which you're gonna have a look at in a second, is also so clean. It just doesn't make sense to me. But let's talk about these wheels here. Some people say that they don't like these wheels and that they don't suit to this type of car, but this being the 760, the sportiest version of the 7 Series in my opinion, I want to have some sporty looking wheels, and these are the 21M wheels. So you have 285 width of the tire in the rear end, you have 255 width in the front end, and you also have the rear wheel steering, which is a fantastic feature on this car, because when you go and drive this car, if you ever get a chance to drive a 7 Series new one, just go and do it and see how it feels to drive. It almost feels like a 3 Series. That's how nimble this thing is in the corners. Now, I don't know about you, but I probably would not pay $16,000 to have this two-tone color that we have here, but what it does, it kind of shrinks the volume to have the top part be black and this section be in this burgundy color, and then you have black at the lower section as well. It makes this height feel a little shorter and the whole car just becomes a bit more nimble. What I would get for this though, I think this would look really great since it is a 7 Series, want to have it in a classy, elegant color. I would probably go with some tone of gray for this design with these specific wheels. I think that would look fantastic on the 760. Now, coming around to the rear end of the 760, and I have to say this 760, both in the front and in the rear, it looks so much better than the i7. One detail here that makes it look a lot better, in my opinion, is the lower section, because we have the quad tailpipes here in this black color. It looks fantastic. We have some sort of diffuser in the middle, and then the black piece is sticking up into the bumper, again reducing some of that weight that we have back here. But overall, have a look at the rear and compare this to the complexity in the front end, and also compare the side to the complexity in the front end. And that's the biggest confusion I have with the exterior design of the new 7 Series. Everything else, the proportions, the side, the rear, look absolutely fantastic. Proper 7 Series, simplicity is the key, and then you have the front end where everything becomes super complex. Now, when you design a 7 Series, you want to keep it tight, you want to keep it elegant and clean and simple. Horizontal lines in combination with vertical lines, and I think that's exactly what's going on here, specifically when you have these taillights sticking in this far, being pretty thin in the rear. I also like the graphics that we have here on the side. Some of these graphics, it comes back on the inside, this crystal pattern that I'm not a huge fan of on the interior. We're gonna have a look at that in just a second. And up top, you do have this lip spoiler coming back on the 7 Series. I'm really glad to see this back on the trunk of the 7. It is in the same color as we have here, so it is black. You have the big BMW logo in the middle with the camera mounted inside of the logo itself. And if we open this up, you have a pretty decent trunk here, just like we expect for a big German flagship sedan. I think it looks gorgeous back here. And when I look at it, there's really nothing I would like to change as I would on the i7, because we have all the connections to the mechanical parts down here with the exhaust, which complements the rear end of this and doesn't make it look as high as it does on the i7. Now, looking at the 7 Series from a straight rear view, and this is where I think you can clearly see the elegance and also the proper stance of this BMW, because we have these fenders slightly bulging outwards and being planted by these 285mm rear tires. The graphics as well, you can see all the horizontal lines that we have going, creating this width of this car with the taillights up here. Overall, I think it's just a fantastic looking design. The only thing that we need to change is obviously a little tweak in the front end. Welcome to the very unique interior of the 2023 BMW 760i. It's a little windy outside, so let's close the door. You do that by pressing this button on this crystal bar right here, and you can see it automatically closes the door. Pretty fancy stuff. The funny thing is about this interior that is very strange is that they put some carbon fiber in the dash. This is a 5,000-pound vehicle. Putting some carbon fiber in the interior is not gonna necessarily affect the weight of this car, but they decided to put it in here just to have some more of that sporty feel. And it does look good, I have to say that. It does look very good, this type of carbon fiber that we have up here and down here. So we have a 12.3 inch gauge cluster, 14.5 inch infotainment screen. I've talked a lot about this system before and what I think about it. This is just what BMW is doing these days, having two big screens, a big flat screen on the dash that doesn't necessarily look very well integrated in the rest of the design. It looks like they tried to make a cap or a housing for the gauge cluster with this curvature that goes out here, but I think that's mainly to fit whatever is going on here with the head-up display in front of you. So let's have a look at what you get inside of this infotainment screen. It is pretty complex. You have a lot of things that you can do here. For example, you have the mobile device, personal assistant, my mode, seat comfort, climate control. You have that in here as well. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. Displays, vehicle status, and a bunch of other things that are all separated icons here. So this feels like I just picked up some random person's phone and went through all the apps. This is how many apps you have inside here. So let's click on the climate, for example. And this is the biggest issue I have with this iDrive 8 system, is the climate settings. Because if you're inside anything else than the climate setting itself, the only thing that's static in the bottom is the temp control. So you can adjust the temperature anytime you want, because that's always gonna be at the bottom. But if you wanna adjust anything else in regards to climate settings, for example, the fan speed, the fan direction and so on, you have to go into the software. But thankfully you do have heated and cooled seats right here, so you adjust that in this very cluttered looking layout of the graphics for the climate control settings. And if you want to adjust how the air comes out, you have two different options. You have dynamic and balanced, and I have no idea what that means when it comes to the fan or the air direction. You just have to pick one and I guess see what happens with the air when you pick dynamic or balance. But that's not all when it comes to the climate control settings and the fan settings in here, because you see this crystal bar here that is beautifully backlit. I think it looks nice. Is it my personal style? Probably not, but I think the people actually would buy this 760. I think they would like the styling in here, because you have a lot of crystals everywhere in this center console here, in the dash, in the doors, and everything is backlit in this beautiful color depending on what drive mode you're in. But for example, if you want to turn off this vent here, you have this slider inside of the crystals themselves. So you slide it from 0 to 1. 1, I assume, would mean that you have it be open, and 0 means that it is closed. So now it's not blowing anything here. And you have 4 of them. You have 1 over there, 2 in the middle, and 1 here on the driver's side as well. You also have the hazard lights inside. But that's not all when it comes to the fan. There's still more here. Look at these small toggles at the bottom. Just stick out from the surface down here, and they're located exactly underneath this slider for how to open and close the vent. So this is how you angle where the air is going to come out from. And I don't think I've ever seen a weirder integration of how you adjust the direction of the air than this. It's just very unique, and I'm not sure if it's better or worse than other BMW products. I would still probably just prefer to have a normal vent that I can just angle whenever I want, instead of having to play around with this tiny little thing down here. And the vents themselves are located right here. You have a slot here, you have a slot up top, you also have a slot down here and on the driver's side. So the vent situation in the BMW 7 Series is definitely something new and something that I have not seen in any other car before. Moving down further on the center console, you do have this wireless charging here with a very rugged surface to it, making sure that your phone is not going to slide around everywhere when you go into sport and take this up the mountains. Then you have 2 cup holders here, pretty standard size. You can cover these up if you want to with this gloss plastic. But on the side here on the center console, this carbon fiber that we have up here comes back in the side of the center console. And the center console itself is all piano black. It's going to give you a lot of fingerprints on it. You have some crystals going on here, similar to what we have in this area here. For example, the start button is also crystal. The gear selector, crystal as well. We can pop it into reverse, and let me show you the cameras that we have here. So you have a normal, regular reverse camera. You also have the 360 camera. If you want more, you can go into panoramic view. It's going to give you a wider shot of the rear end. And if you want even more than that, you can go into 3D view. This is going to give you a full 3D view of your BMW 760. You just click on where you want the camera to be pointing in this top 360 view. It's a very cool system, and it's super easy to figure this out and clearly see exactly where the wheels are positioned in the car. Fantastic job by BMW to implement this specific camera system in the 760. Moving further down, you do have this dial that we talked so much about. You can do this to control whatever goes on in the infotainment screen. If you don't want to use your finger, you still have this physical dial to control the same functions that you would control with the touchscreen. You also have a couple of buttons up here. For example, the navigation button is right here. The native navigation system of BMW looks pretty decent. Not the most beautiful system I've ever seen, but it is very responsive. I would probably always use Apple CarPlay anyway in this system and not use this native one. Let's put it back in park. You have the auto hold for the brake button. You have the camera button, the parking sensors. You can also raise up the 7 Series. If you happen to come across some tougher obstacles and you want to have a higher ride height, you just have to click this button and the car itself is going to go up a little bit. Then you have this crystal slider here, or button, for the volume control. I'm not sure what I think about this. I would much rather just have it be a knob that you turn instead of just scrolling up and down like this. The center armrest does have some storage in it. It's not big at all, but you do have 2 USB-Cs back here, and it's split open, and you also have this very soft leathery material here. You don't have a lot of leather in this interior. As you can see, these seats are actually cloth, and this is the one thing that a lot of people this week, while I've had this car and had a look at this car, they're so surprised to see cloth seats in a $162,000 BMW 7 Series. But I can tell you this, these are some of the most comfortable seats I've ever been in. It feels like I'm sitting in my living room in a couch and just lounging in these seats. Super comfortable. They also have massage built in, and you do have some white leather up top, similar to what we have in the center armrest right here. And very thick and fat headrest in the back, with this carbon fiber coming back in the headrests as well. Looking up top, you do have a big panoramic roof here, so you can open this up if you want to. It's covered up a little bit in the back seat by a 33-inch widescreen TV that's hanging in the ceiling. We're gonna have a look at that in just a second, and how you can definitely lounge back there. If you're going on a road trip, this is one of these cars that you wouldn't mind being a rear passenger, because you can make that into a first class seat with the TV up top, and it almost reclines into a bed as well. I'm gonna show you that in just a second. Moving on to the steering wheel here. So keep in mind this car, as spec, almost fully equipped. I think this, now you can't get more options than this that we have in here, but this steering wheel still feels a little normal to me when you have it in a 7 Series. I want to have it be a little bit more special than this. We do have the same gray leather that we have all over in this car up here, for example, coming back in the steering wheel. You have the controls for the gauge cluster. So this gauge cluster, I like it because you have augmented reality. You can have that as a center display. You can choose whatever content you want to have in the center display. You can also change the head-up display up in front of you and show you whatever information you want there. And I do like all the graphics that we have specifically for the head-up display. They look very sharp, very futuristic styling there. And that's what I love about the gauge cluster here. Even though it is just a square and it doesn't look very beautiful, the software and the user interface in the cluster itself is very, very well made. And this entire interior also changes depending on what drive modes you're in. So you have your modes here. These are not just drive modes, these are more like themes for the entire car. So everything in here changes when you press a mode that you have in here. For example, digital art, it's not going to open up the sunroof for some reason. I think maybe BMW connects art with having more sun coming in from the top. I'm not entirely sure, but this now turns into purple. Very beautifully done. The backlit crystal is purple. And if we, for example, go into sport, we get everything in here being red. For example, let's activate this. The gauge cluster turns red. You have a red background for the infotainment screen, and you have this gradient coloring now in this crystal piece, for going from purple, blue to red. This looks fantastic when you're driving this car at night. Personally, I like to have it in 2 different drive modes, which is personal, which is the more cruise, loungy feel. It doesn't rev too high. It's in between. It's still sporty, and if you push it, you still get the full power and the acceleration. And I also like to keep it, of course, when I go up these roads up here, which we're going to do in just a second, I like to keep it in sport and also in manual, because this 8-speed connected with these paddles works really well. Even though this is a huge sedan, as I said before, it feels like a 3 Series to drive this thing. The paddles themselves, they're not very big, but they are attached to the steering wheel, so you know exactly where they are, because you basically have your hands at the same position at all times, so it's very easy to find where they are. On the left side of the steering wheel are the controls for the cruise control settings, and I do like this third spoke here. So you have this pattern of the crystals coming back in this third spoke, and you also have the M badge at the very bottom, showing you that this is not your average 7 Series. This has some M pieces in it. Moving on to the left side of the steering wheel, you have the settings for the light controls, and you also have this door opening button that is the same one that we have over there, which will automatically open the door for you. You do have the memory seat settings here inside of this crystal, same style that we have all across the interior. Some buttons are just inside or behind this crystal bar, and the way you open the glove box, you push this button here, boom, and you open it up. It's not very big, but there's no way you can open this manually. You need to click this logo here that shows something opening to open the glove box. So with that said, let's jump into the back seat and let me show you how loungy it can be back there when you fold down the TV and recline the seat. Now, if you ever jump into the back seat of a brand new 7 Series, make sure you have the passenger side, because what this has right here is a fully reclining seat, meaning that you can always lay down back here. The front seat folds down, you have a footrest down there, and on top of that, you have this 33-inch widescreen TV up here. Is it maybe a little over the top? Yes, I would say so. And from my experience having this car for a week now and playing around with this, it's not very easy to use, because if the front seats are too far backwards, you have to move them, go in the front seats and move them forward, so this can actually fold down. And on top of that, since this is white and very light leather in the back and plastic, this is gonna get so dirty when you put your feet up here. But other than that, I guess it's a cool concept. It is, after all, a 7 Series. You want to have a little bit more of that finesse to the design, and you also have these small screens in each door handle where you control everything back here. So you swipe up to unlock it, and then you have the Fire TV, which is this one up here. You have the display settings. You can change the modes back here, so you can have theater, for example, and all these curtains in the back and on the sides are gonna fold up to make it a little cozier, while this 33-inch display folds down from the roof. It's pretty insane what BMW is doing in the back seats. In addition to controlling everything that goes on with the screen and the seats, from here, you also have the climate control settings inside of this display itself. So you just click on the climate control settings. You can angle the air exactly where you want it to come out from and change the fan speed. You have heated and cooled seats in the rear as well. Very, very fancy in the 7 Series. So overall, this interior to me feels a little over the top, as I said, but it is pushing the boundaries of what's possible when it comes to luxury in the interior. Is it seamless and smooth? Not really. I would prefer to have some more traditional functions, for example, for the air vents in the front end and the climate control settings. But that also goes to show that this BMW 7 Series is not really for me. I do still think that the people who are buying this car, they would love to have stuff like this. I think the right persons, they would probably appreciate all the stuff that goes on in here a lot more. Now, forget for a second about the design and what you don't like and also what you do like about this design. Let's focus on what matters here. BMW, they're building the ultimate driving machines. At least that's what they say. And that's the case with this BMW 760. So what do we have under the hood? We have a 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, putting out 536 horsepower, 553 pound-feet of torque. And this thing goes. It's so smooth to drive this thing. 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds. The base price for the 760s around $116,000, but this one is spec'd up to $162,000, which we talked about earlier. But the design of this thing, I personally, as I said in my video a year ago, I think this design is so close to being a great BMW 7 Series. It's just the front that needs some tweaking. The proportions of this thing and the way it drives. The thing about this is that it feels like driving a 3 Series with, I mean, maybe not in the weight category. This is about 5,000 pounds, so it's a lot heavier than a 3 Series. But it's so nimble. We're gonna go into some twisty roads up here in a moment, and I'm gonna show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so let's pop it into manual mode. And let's use these shifters. The reason I think why this feels so insanely nimble in the corners, even though it is such a big package, is because of the rear or all-wheel steering, which is not something new. It's something that Mitsubishi had in their 1990 Mitsubishi 3000 GT, but I think it helps, or it's more noticeable in a long wheelbase car like we have here. It is such a joy to drive this thing. And as I said, if you get a chance to drive it, just go and do it, because it doesn't make sense that a 7 Series is supposed to handle this well, but it does. The thing about when you're driving this, you forget about everything else that goes on with this car. You don't think about the design, you don't think about the interior in my case. You're just amazed by how well this 760 handles and how well it sounds with the V8 up top. It just keeps on pulling like a locomotive. It's like a tsunami of power. It's not one of these, it's not the same feeling that you get in a sports car that will be the same 0 to 60 in 4.1. This is more of a just surge of power behind you that pushes you forward. This 8-speed automatic is fantastic as well. It's just very quick and very snappy. I do wish that the pedals were just a little bit taller, because they're almost like just a square sitting behind the steering wheel, but at least, as I said, they're attached to the steering wheel itself, which helps to know exactly where they are at all times. So how do we sum this 7 Series up? I think, again, BMW is trying so many new things, and they're trying to reinvent a lot of features that for a long time have been pretty static in the automotive design industry. And I do appreciate that. Sometimes they nail it. For example, the new 2 Series, one of these cars that's been growing on me the most of any car I've ever experienced before. I think it's starting to look really good, specifically with the squared fenders, and when you put the right wheels on it, lowered by an inch. This 7 Series, it's also a very cool design. It has the E38 type of modernized proportions. The only thing that we need to redesign is, of course, the front end, which we talked about in this video. And last but not least, does it drive like a BMW? Absolutely. This is a quick machine, and it is so comfortable. You can drive this for hours and hours without getting tired with these cloth seats that feels like you're sitting in a couch. So comfortable. Overall, a fantastic job by BMW in my opinion. And if you have a different opinion, I would encourage you to hold on your final judgment until you get behind the wheel of one of these.